Thank you, and welcome everyone to this 34th Academy about the survey performance. As you can see from the introduction, this is not a new feature. We only have renamed this feature. This feature was formerly known as survey metrics. I think it will become clear during the Academy why we have renamed this feature. One word, or what I will be talking about in this Academy is what sort of metrics we have with which you can monitor your survey performance, how you can use those metrics to locate any problems in your survey, and what happens if those metrics become critical and we actually take action, and what you should do then. What I will not talk about in this Academy is about scripting. Reason for that is that not everyone on this call is a scripter, so that won't be interesting for everyone. And what we actually have seen in the revamped feature, the survey performance feature, is that those scripts that actually run into problems either have a very simple problem, they are using an infinite loop, or they are so specific in the complicated things that they are doing that it is actually not very interesting to discuss this in such a general meeting as this. We will release a new survey scripting course within a month, and there we will talk about metrics and what sort of scripting tricks you can do to keep those metrics good. This will take about 30 to 45 minutes, this Academy. So let's start. Short look about the agenda. There will be a introduction where I will explain what the reason is behind these metrics. And then we'll take a look at a different type of metrics that we have implemented. Then a demo how you should use those how you can use those metrics to monitor your survey, and how to use those metrics value to locate any problems in your survey. Finally, we will take a look what happens when your Academy, when your metrics reach a critical value, what Nfield does at that moment and how you should react on that. So why that? Two reasons for those metrics. Our original reason when we implemented the survey metrics about 1.5 years ago is that Nfield is working on shared resources. And that simply means the more you use, the less is left for anyone else. And it means that if you launch a survey that uses an unreasonable amount of resources, you can actually bring other surveys into problems. That was our main reason to launch those survey metrics about 18 months ago. So we can keep an eye on those surveys that are misbehaving in that way and actually take action on those surveys. Second reason is that those metrics also indicate pretty clearly to you which of your surveys are performing badly, and that will almost certainly mean that your respondents have not a very good experience doing your surveys. So those two reasons, original reasons for those metrics. We take a little bit more in detail in those two. First one, that Nfield is still working on shared resources, and as you can see here, I have put that still into in between brackets. The reason for that is that we are busy with a new feature, survey isolation. And survey isolation means that we will place every survey in its own bucket, and that means that the original reason that we had, that we need to keep a close eye on those monitors because you are using shared resources, is no longer valid if this feature when this feature has been rolled out. At that moment, a misbehaving survey can only cause harm to itself and not to other surveys. As said, this feature will be rolled out in the next months. It is already, sorry, it is already rolled out in one of our installations. Those in America, it will be rolled out after a test period there to all other installations as well. When survey isolation is complete, as I said, bad performing surveys can no longer cause problems for other surveys. There is one exception for this. We will talk about that when we take a look at the different metrics that we are monitoring. Because one of those metrics is actually still using a shared resource. But for now, this is less of a reason to use those metrics as it was before. That also is the reason why we have renamed this from survey metrics to performance, because this is the one reason that is still left. A bad metrics will almost certainly mean a bad experience for your respondents. The metrics have been re-evaluated. We not only changed the name, we actually re-evaluated those metrics. We added a new one, and we took a good look at the limits that we had on the metrics that were already there, and we noticed that they were actually way too critical. So they have been raised substantially, so high that certainly for the first 3 metrics that we will discuss shortly, we can say with certainty if those metrics fire, your respondents are having this experience. They are looking at surveys that take seconds and maybe even minutes to go from one page to the other. Like I said, the re-evaluating has resulted in much higher thresholds, and we can certainly now say a bad metrics is a bad user experience. So that is a very good reason for you to actually keep an eye on those metrics. Although we as NIPO have less of a reason to keep an eye on those metrics. So the type of metrics that we check. The first 3 should be familiar, because those 3 we already checked before. That is page complexity, expression complexity, and interview state size. We added a new one, which is the expensive command count. Let's take a look detail at those 4 things. Page complexity, that is simply the number of instructions that are executed before showing a page. I put a picture of a lot of brands on the right side, because that is usually the reason when this metrics becomes high, that you have a very large brand, list, and you are doing a lot of filtering in between page to actually filter out the brands that you would not want to show for this particular interview. To give you some sort of idea, before that metric starts firing, this metrics needs to raise to 10,000s, to a number into the 10,000s, and that does not really translate to one count for each instruction, because it depends a bit on what you are doing. But normally you have to have hundreds of instructions or a very big repeat where you are doing nothing but executing things before this metric starts firing. Other important thing for this metrics, as for the next 2 metrics, these only counts the actions that you take in between pages, so they don't build up over the entire survey. It is only about what happens moving from one survey page to the next survey page. So page complexity, the number of instructions that you do coming from one page to the other page. What of course also matters is what you are actually doing, and this is what we call expression complexity. Some of the instructions you can do are much complex than the other instructions, and this actually tells you, this matrix will tell you if that complexity comes too much. Basically, your complexity, that expression complexity, will basically mean because you are doing very complicated calculations, as I've seen an example here, or if you are doing a lot of date manipulation, dates manipulation. For both of these things, also shows maybe Odin is not the most efficient way to do that. If you really need to do complicated calculations or manipulated date, you probably should use a team and do this with Java. Then the new one, the expensive command count. These are commands that are using lots of processing power. This is the one exception. These are the 3 commands that are still using shared resources. The commands are strat, so the stratification command, get least field quota list, and get data. Again, this is not about how often you are using these commands in your script. It's how often you are calling these commands in between questions. It basically means that you should not loop over any of these commands. If you start doing that and you by accident create an endless loop, it will be stopped by the system pretty quickly. Experience over the last months show that if we have problems on Nfield, that is almost always because people have created an endless loop that is looping over one of these 3 commands. So this is actually something where we have put the metrics pretty strict. We'll talk about that later. Last of the metrics that we are tracking is the state size. This metrics is a bit different from the previous 3 in that the previous 3 metrics are all metrics about things happening going from one page to the next survey page. This metrics actually is tracking a metrics that builds up over the duration of your survey. So this is one metrics that will become bigger and bigger depending on how large your survey is and depending on what you are doing in your survey. This used to be the metrics previously if you had a metrics firing critical, but almost always was the state size. But as I said, we have considerably raised the ceiling on those metrics. And I have not seen that many state size problems since. Any questions so far, Art, before I go into the demo?
No questions so far, but Frank, I noted the line is dropping a little bit, so please speak up if you can.
Okay. So let's go into the demo where we will actually take a look to surveys. I have created a few surveys. As you can see, none of them are at this moment flagged, because if a survey is flagged for using extensive resources, you will immediately see it in this list. It will be sorted on top of this list as using extensive resources. I created one of these surveys to create complex surveys. Let me make sure It's this survey called complexity. So let's simply run this survey. See what happens. So it's a very simple survey. It only consists of 2 questions. The first question that actually runs if we want to skip over the repeat that I have placed in between those 2 questions, or that we want to run this repeat. Let's first skip over this repeat. Then we are in Q2, and that will end this questionnaire. And if we take a look at the questionnaire, back to surveys, you will see it is still not flagged as using extensive resources. Now, if I run this survey again, and this time I say, let's not skip over that repeat in between those 2 questions. You will see it gets to Q2, and it should be flagged. It was rather quickly. Let's do this again.
I think you skipped over it.
Yeah, I think I skipped over that. Yeah, this looks more like it's actually running the repeat. As you can see, this is typical. If your metric starts firing, there is really happening something here in between those questions, which takes seconds to execute. So let's now actually close the survey, go back to press F5. And as you will see, this complexity survey is now actually sorted on top with a new label that it's using excessive resources. It's yellow, that means that this is a warning. It's not, it has not reached the critical level. But this way you can immediately see from the survey list if a survey is misbehaving. It has a clear label that is sorted on top. So it's always in view. So now, we now know there is a problem in the survey. Now, how can we locate this problem? We go to the monitor page, and the monitor page has a tab called performance. And if we open that tab, you will see the four metrics that we have discussed previously. And in this case, you see, okay, the problem is in the page complexity. There are 2 bars here. One bar is the aggregate, that is the performance over all survey versions. The one that really matters is the one on top, the published version, because this is any problem occurring in the current version of the survey, in the version that is live at this point. One thing that I forgot to point out during the demo, as you saw, those metrics are only firing if there is actually an interview that is running into problems. So what those metrics do not do is evaluate your survey and then start firing because it finds a construction in that survey, which could be problematic. Those metrics only fire if there really is an interview that runs into problems. And as you can see in this metrics, we have run 3 interviews. 2 went fine. 1 actually reached a warning size. So if we now would want to see, okay, what actually is the problem here? We can download a log. So let's do that. And that log can be found where you can find all the downloads. So in the download page, it actually said, okay, I have downloaded the interview and metrics log. Let's open up that. It's a CSV file, so it will open in Excel for me. And it's a very simple log. It has a log for each interview that run into problems. For this particular case, there was only 1 interview that had a problem, so I only have 1 issue in this log. Starts with a timestamp, tracking ID, then the actual metric name that caused the problem, which was the page complexity, the value of that matrix, the question where this matrix appeared, and then false means false. No, we have not taken any action based on this matrix. Nfield has not taken any action based on this matrix. Which means it's a warning, it's not critical. Live meaning it's a live interview, it's not a test interview. The important thing here is the Q2. This is the question where this problem appeared, and the other one is the tracking ID, because you can use the tracking ID to actually locate the precise interview where this problem appeared. So if we take the tracking ID here, let's copy it, then go back to the Nfield Manager, sample and invitations. Then, as you can see, in the sample table, we actually have this tracking ID, so I could create a filter. Tracking ID equals, and then I copy what I found in the log. And it actually points out to the actual interview that run into this problem. So now I know the interview ID too, it's 13. So if I wanted to look in the data what actually happened, what did this respondent do, I can now check in the data every answer that this respondent actually gave. So that's one thing you can do with that log. The other thing, and that's probably a bit more important, as you remember, it said here that it was actually Q2 where this problem was appearing. So we could go to set.survey, download this survey. So I'm very sure that the survey I'm looking at is actually the survey that is being used. By downloading it, and okay. Let's open. So this is survey. As you can see, it's a very short survey. It said that a problem appeared at question 2, which is here. And remember, page complexity just as expression complexity. That's not about what happens on this question, but what happens in between those two pages. So that what happens in between question 1 and question 2. And as you can do, I placed simply a repeat that runs 250,000 times and raises a counter 250,000 times. So, usually what happens if it starts firing, there is indeed a repeat like this, which has a very unclear end condition, so it keeps running and running. So that is how you can use that log. Then there's one other thing that we created. Maybe before doing that, let's first actually take a look at, we still have survey was flagged for consuming excessive resources. The only way you can get rid of this flag, so that this survey is actually being flagged as using excessive resources, if you upload a new queue file. By uploading a new queue file, you restart, and that will reset the flag. So that is something you could do if it are only test surveys that are actually running into those problems, which most of the time it is, there's something in testing which caused this problem. If you then want to have this survey no longer flagged and no longer sorted on top, simply upload a new version where you change something and it will be reset, and it will no longer be flagged until the moment where that survey run into problems again, of course. So let's take a look at the last thing that we created to back to surveys, for you to check your check the metrics. We do that here with the page complex survey. As I said, there is one survey metrics, which is the survey state size, which is not about a problem happening in between questions, but that builds up during the entire survey. So that is typically one thing. If you have a problem as such, you cannot use the log to pinpoint the exact location in your survey. It will point to a question, but that is the question where those metrics became, where that survey size became problematic, and that is not necessarily the question where the largest increase in that size happens. It just is the question where it became problematic. So if you want to check that, you need to do a different trick, and that is if we go to the preview page. If you open preview, there are two options here. The first one is the option to open the preview, and the second one here is to open the interviewing metrics. And if you open the interviewing metrics, you can look at how those metrics are growing while you are doing the interview. So let's actually do that. I will open up metrics and I will open up the interview here. So let's sort this a bit. So I can have the interview and the metrics at the same time. So I now have the metrics here. I have my interview here and the metrics here. This is start of the interview. There is already a page complexity which has to do with things happening while starting this interview. First question I have is a question before a matrix question. So let's start that one, and you see the matrix here appearing, and you see how the metrics are behaving. As you can see, the page complexity for a matrix question is actually not that high. It's 2, which is a normal size. You see the interview state size growing a bit because we have added a new question. This is no problem at all, these sizes. Let's go to this matrix. It will come to the next question, which is the question after the matrix. Again, you see the state size not growing much, page complexity 2, because that is the complexity that belongs with just the question. Let's do the next question. The next question is also a matrix, a bit more complicated matrix in the sense that it is a compound matrix. It uses a different set. Again, as you see, that doesn't matter for the page complexity. It's still a question. So these are not the things that actually matter for the complex of your question, for the complexity of your performance. I put all this to none, so I can actually skip through it. Second question after the matrix, still nothing here. Then, okay, there was one page in between here which it skipped, which was using a rather complex filter expression. And I did not give the correct answer, so it did not show that question, but you can see that that happened because of the expression complexity that we now all of a sudden have. And that is due to a filter statement that was due there. Again, this is not a complexity to worry about. I also done a repeat. And in that repeat, I simply filled a index variable 10,000 times. And as you can see, that made the state size grow. It did not make the state size grow to a worrying amount, but it made the state size grow considerably concerned if you compare it to the next state size, to the previous state size. And then the second repeat comes, and that actually, as you can see, the state size now has grown to a warning state. Again, the only thing I do in this repeat is fill a variable, and this time I fill it 20,000 times. So these are not things that you would normally do. But this is how the interviewer metrics in the preview, how you can walk through this, and actually it will tell you when things become problematic because it will flag it as yellow at that point. Okay, this ends this one. Any questions at this point, Art?
Yeah, we got a question about whether the metrics from the Odin developer generate the same data as the log that you can download.
Yeah, it represents that data a bit different, but it's the exact same data as the log. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So to resume the demo, the survey list will sort the problematic surveys on top. Use the monitor performance tab for details. What metrics are firing, and how serious that problem is. You might have 10,000 of interviews, and if it is only one interview that actually run into this problem, yeah, you might not worry about that. That means that one of your respondents found a routing path which run into problems. Use the log from the monitor performance tab to locate the problem in the script and to locate the actual respondent that run into this problem. And use preview to locate state size problems and to evaluate the scripts before going live. So now, so far we looked at the warnings. Now what will actually happen if those metrics reach a critical size? If that happens, we will stop the interview. We will stop the interview in which this happens. Mind you, that is the interview. We will not stop the survey. The interview in which this happens will be stopped. Why do we do this? Well, simply we do this to protect your survey. As you can see in the previous examples, you have to do very strange things to actually get those metrics to fire. You have to give 10,000 of instructions in between pages. It almost certainly means that you have created an endless loop and that survey is simply looping over commands without actually processing. If we let that happen, it will actually bring down your entire survey. So we stopped that interview simply to protect your survey, and almost certainly any stopped interview will in all likelihood already be abandoned because it's probably a respondent that already looked at a stuck screen for minutes and probably has closed down his browser already. So next demo. How does that actually look like when we stop a survey? What does a performer, what does the respondent see, and what you can do once this has happened? So, no, not here. Let's go back to close these ones and go back to the surveys. So I have another one, which is actually called stopped by metrics. As you can see, this one has not been flagged yet because it hasn't happened yet, or at least it hasn't happened yet for the version I have published at this point. Go to the setup. I can open this survey, copy the live link, and do the survey. I need to give this survey respondent ID, so I can restart it. Okay, again, this is a very, this is not a large survey. This tool contains of 2 questions. The first question where I simply ask, should I loop over the quota endlessly, yes or no? Again, if I click no here, it will skip to the next question, which is the question after the strat command, and then it will end the survey. And as said previously, those metrics only fire if there really is a problem, if one of your respondents really run into a problem. So if we look at the survey list now, you will see that is still not flagged as a problematic survey. Now, let's now same thing again. So and let's this time actually loop over the quota. We'll stock for a while until it has actually reached the thresholds. And this is what your respondents see if they are still looking at the screen when a matrix reaches a critical limit. It is routed to this page. This is a standard response page. So you can, in the fieldwork settings, you can point this to another page that where you can perhaps give a more detailed explanation of what they should do if they run into this. The default is this message that your request could not be processed and that you should contact the survey administrator for more information. Okay, what does this look like in your survey? Well, first of all, let's actually try this. No, let's first take a look here. And as you can now see, that is actually flagged on top, stopped by metrics. It's using excessive resources, and this time it's not yellow, it's black, and black means we actually, this has reached a critical threshold, and we actually took action. We stopped an interview because of this. How you can see which interview was stopped, you can go to sample, and the interview that was stopped, this one, it has response code 108. That means this interview was stopped due to a metrics overload. The result is still a dropped out. So it's a dropped out with response code 108. One important thing to realize for this dropped out, you cannot restart this dropped out. If I try to do that, it will immediately go to this page again. Because you can restart it, but that will just resurface this problem. So we're not even restarting the survey. We are immediately routing them to this page. So you cannot restart a 108 survey like this. What you are supposed to do is now actually try to find out what this problem is using the tricks I showed you in the previous demo. And once you think you have solved the problem here, upload a new survey, and as soon as you have done that, you can actually restart the survey. So let's actually do that. Let's this one. Open. It's the loop strat survey. This is the one. So as you can see, I'm simply looping over this survey again and again and again. I could make a very simple change in the surveys, removing this question, but didn't do anything anyway. Save this one, and if I now go back to this survey, back to the manager, setup survey, upload my new one. Save this one. As you can see, the problem here was an endless loop, and I already get a warning. Jump to previous question. That warning is there for a reason, because this is a potential endless loop. So if you see warnings like this, please check them. The fact that I still get this warning means that I actually did not solve my endless loop. I just did another change. I save that, and if I now publish this, keep an eye on the fact that this survey was flagged for consuming extensive resources. If I publish it, that will actually be removed, because I now have published a new version, and we have not seen any problems in this new version yet. And I can also actually restart this survey. Now I can actually restart the survey. It restarts at the question where the problem occurred. Obviously, if I say yes here, it will simply create a new problem here, because I have not actually solved the problem in the survey. Okay. So, to resume, if a matrix fired due to critical problems, locate that problem in your survey using the tricks that I showed in the previous demo. Stopped interviews due to critical performance problems will be a dropped out interview at response code 108. We saw that. Dropped out interviews can only 108 dropped out interviews can only be resumed after a script change has been published. Until that point, every 108 that is resumed will immediately be routed to no, there is still a problem in this survey. Any questions at this point?
No, it's all clear, Frank. No questions.
Good. Then I have the final remarks. Recording of the session will be made available later this week. As always, the manuals are already updated with the new information. Next Academy session, we'll have an Academy about our end-to-end solution, the private data repository. We will have an Academy in November about the last step in the manager migration, that is KPUat sampling points, but addresses will be added to the new manager. And as I said in the beginning, there is a scripting course too in the making that will include the metrics. We will release that within a month. If we do that, there will be a very short Academy introducing that course. Any final questions?
No questions.
Okay, then thank you for joining. Talk to you in 2 weeks about the private data repositories.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.